All right, let's jump right in. We're going to tackle a huge question that feels so incredibly modern, but has actually been bugging us for centuries. And that is the fear that technology will just make human jobs disappear. So, will a robot, or maybe an algorithm, eventually take your job?
And look, this is not science fiction. As former U.S. Treasury Secretary Lawrence Summers puts it, this is happening right now. That feeling, that immediacy. That's exactly why this conversation is so important today.
So, to get us all on the same page, let's address the robot in the room, so to speak. What do we actually mean when we talk about technological unemployment? At its core, it's pretty simple. It's jobs being lost specifically because of new tech. This could be the classic mechanical muscle stuff, like a giant machine on a factory floor, but more and more, it's about mechanical mind processes. Yeah, we're talking about AI and automation. The bottom line is technology finds a way to do a job better or cheaper than a person can.
Okay, but here's the thing that's really wild. While AI feels brand new, the fear itself, it's ancient. I mean, we have been worrying about this for a long, long time. Let's do a quick trip through history.
I mean, we're talking way, way back. Ancient Greece, Aristotle was already imagining tools that could work all by themselves. Fast forward a few centuries, and you have Roman Emperor Vespasian literally blocking an invention to save jobs. Then, in the 1500s, Queen Elizabeth I did the same thing with a knitting machine because she thought it would create beggars. You've probably heard of the Luddites smashing looms in the 1800s. And then, finally, in 1930, the famous economist John Maynard Keynes gave this old anxiety its modern name.
And this quote from Vespasian, man, it just gets right to the heart of it all. He saw a new, efficient invention, but he chose to protect people's ability to make a living. He said, "You must allow my poor hauliers to earn their bread." That tension, progress versus people, it's the exact same debate we're having right now.
And it wasn't a one-off. Queen Elizabeth II said almost the exact same thing about that knitting machine. Her worry wasn't about the technology itself, but about her people. She was afraid it would bring them to ruin. So you see, this has always been a battle between pushing forward and keeping people stable.
So that historical tension, it leads us straight into the great jobs debate that's raging today among economists and thinkers. The arguments have gotten a lot more complex, but the core disagreement is pretty much the same.
The whole thing really breaks down into two camps. On one side, you have the optimists. They say, look, technology is messy in the short term, but it always ends up creating new jobs and new industries. Just look at history. Then, on the other side, you have the pessimists, and they're saying, hold on, this time is different. They think that AI is a whole new ballgame, and that it could actually break that historical pattern for good.
Now, for the past couple of centuries, the optimists have had this ace up their sleeve called the Luddite fallacy. Basically, it's the idea that it's a mistake, a fallacy, to think that technology permanently destroys jobs. And for a long time, most economists agreed, because the worriers were ignoring something called compensation effects. So what in the world are compensation effects? Well, think of it as a positive chain reaction. First off, somebody's got to build the new machines, right? That's jobs. Then, the companies using those machines make bigger profits, which they reinvest, creating more jobs. At the same time, the tech makes things cheaper for all of us. That means we have more money to spend on other stuff, which drives up demand and, yep, creates even more jobs. And maybe the biggest one of all, new tech creates entire industries that never existed before. I mean, think about it. Who was an app developer or a social media manager 30 years ago? Nobody.
Which brings us to the billion-dollar question, maybe the trillion-dollar question of our time. That whole theory of compensation effects, it worked out for the steam engine and the assembly line. But does it still hold up in the age of artificial intelligence? Really, is this time different? And this slide right here is the whole argument for why it might be. In the past, we automated mechanical muscle. We replaced physical work. A tractor replaced farm hands, sure, but you still needed a human brain to drive it. The AI revolution, that's a whole different beast. It's starting to automate the mechanical mind. We're not just talking about routine factory work anymore. We're talking about thinking tasks in law, in journalism, even in medicine. Okay, so if we accept that AI is something new, something big, just how many jobs are we talking about? Well, this is where it gets really crazy. Because honestly, the experts are completely all over the place. Back in 2013, a now famous study from Oxford University came out, and wow, it dropped a bombshell. It estimated that a stunning 47% of all jobs in the United States were at high risk of being automated. Let that sink in for a second. Almost half. But then, just a few years later, the OECD, that's a big group of developed countries, put out their own study. And their number? A much, much smaller 9%. So, which one is it? Nearly half of all jobs, or less than 1 in 10? This huge gap tells you everything you need to know about how uncertain all of this really is. And the risk isn't even the same everywhere. As you can see here, a country like Romania, which has a big manufacturing base, could see over 60% of its jobs at risk. This just shows that a country's economy really matters here. This is a global issue, for sure, but it's going to hit very differently depending on where you live. So, given how high the stakes are and how much we just don't know, what on earth do we do about it? Let's move into our last section and look at some of the blueprints people are proposing for the future.
You can basically sort all the potential solutions into 2 big buckets. The first approach is to try and prevent mass unemployment from happening in the first place. Adapt our workforce, change how we work. The second approach is a lot more radical. It basically accepts that widespread job loss might just happen and says we need to build new systems for a world where a traditional job isn't the center of everything.
So in that first bucket, preventing job losses, you see a few main ideas. A big one is education, retraining people and totally rethinking schools to focus on things AI can't do, like creativity and critical thinking. Another idea is to just shorten the work week. If there's less work to go around, maybe we spread it out over more people. And then there's the classic idea of government creating jobs directly through big infrastructure projects. Now that second bucket, this is where things get really futuristic. The idea you hear about most is Universal Basic Income, or UBI, where every single citizen gets a regular paycheck from the government, no strings attached. Another fascinating idea is changing who owns the technology. What if everyone owned a tiny piece of the robots and AI companies, and we all got dividends? All of these ideas point towards something called a post-scarcity economy, a future where automation takes care of our needs, and having a job just isn't that important anymore. So that's where we are. We're standing at this massive crossroads, staring down a fear that Aristotle was thinking about, but now it's supercharged by technology he couldn't have even dreamed of. History tells us we always figure it out. We always create new jobs. But the power of AI forces us to ask that question one more time. Is this time really different? And as we wrap this up, maybe the real question isn't about jobs at all. If we're really heading for a future where technology can create unbelievable wealth with very little human work, then the challenge isn't about finding everyone a job. The real challenge is deciding what we do with all that wealth and what kind of society we actually want to build. What do we value if it's not our jobs?